there was the initial reaction of mainstream society to psychedelic culture, which was actually acceptance. People were into it. The idea of free sex and lots of colors, and I mean, it was kind of interesting. But it coincided with a real fear that things were going to change too rapidly, that the economy might crash, that these kids aren't going to want to have jobs, that the blacks are going to have a revolution, that there's going to be riots. And, you know, people were still scared of communists, and the government was still afraid of revolution. You know, it was only really, 20 years since Hitler. You know, I mean, it was, Hitler to them was like, gosh, like Green Day to us, right? It's that recent, So they were looking at it as a real possibility, this kind of social upheaval, and Stalin and Russian and Bolsheviks, and they all had that in their heads. And this looked to them like Black Panthers coming back and something bad. And psychedelics were seen as sort of the fuel to this potential cultural upheaval. So, yeah, they went on a big campaign against it, making, Leary this enemy of the country, and, and cracking down on the sort of the emerging San Francisco scene. And there was a lot of nastiness in San Francisco too, all these street kids, and, it wasn't really working either. Everyone goes to San Francisco, and how is this economy going to support thousands of kids in the street with no job? So it wasn't really working that way either. But it was seen as a threat, and then, yeah, massive PR went against psychedelics. All this, sort of propaganda about bad trips, which there really had been very, very few of until the real talk of bad trips kind of started, and then Charlie Manson and all that scene was used to really kind of finish it off on this is what happens. Art Linkletter's daughter's going to kill herself. Charlie Manson's going to send your kids to kill Sharon Tate, and just stop. So they got that sort of dark thing happen that Hunter S. Thompson would criticize another way. He would criticize it in sort of the way I am, that there wasn't this sort of that there was an optimism that was ungrounded, that Vietnam was happening, that all this real stuff was going on, and that the psychedelic movement wasn't really addressing that in a real way, and that Timothy and that bunch sold us a false bill of goods that didn't really work. The interesting thing to me now, though, the more interesting thing, is today's rejection of psychedelic culture. As you'll see in The Nation, there was an article about someone saying how Timothy Leary was this horrible guy, and all these people who are willing to say, well, I've had psychedelic experiences, so I can speak truthfully that this is all just crap, or this is all just nothing. And that's really the triumph of free market capitalism over open-mindedness. That is all of these people basically rejecting the real experiences they had. They're rejecting the notion of hope and optimism. They're rejecting the idea that there can be substantive, foundational changes to the way human beings interact. They're rejecting evolution is what they're doing. Even if they're lefties and even if they believe in Darwin, they're objecting to the idea that we can have fundamental societal changes. And they're looking at the 60s and at their own psychedelic use, at their own youths, as naive optimism. And that's kind of sad. That's kind of sad. They're all too willing to completely dismiss everything Leary did and everything his 60s counterparts, Leary and Kesey and Ginsberg and Burroughs and everybody who was around and talking through that era as stuff and nonsense. And it's sort of a situation of, the lady doth protest too much. The reason they have such a stake at discounting that stuff is because there's a part of them that's still crying that the thing they experienced on psychedelics deserves to be part of their worldview, you know, and the fact that it's incompatible with their worldview means that just as I might criticize someone who's a psychedelic head for adopting the psychedelic worldview as reality, these people have adopted some other reality tunnel as hard and fast reality, and the psychedelic experience challenges the foundations of the myth that they're using to go through life. You know, the hard part is to keep it all alive at once. The hard part is to say, I don't know. I just don't know. You know, that's hard, but that's the thing that people, when they're coming down off LSD, always say is, oh, I can feel now, I passed the peak, now I'm coming down. How am I going to hang on to that insight? How am I going to hang on? You know, and then they'll write some silly note like, all is one. You know, and you go back to it a couple of days later, all is one. Okay, great. You know, that didn't work. You know, or something like that. Or the one is the many, or there is no other, and there is a... What? You know, and the thing that they're trying to hang on to isn't any particular thing. That's why you can't write it down. The thing they're trying to hang on to is that sense of infinite possibility and the ability to stay liquid, to stay soft. And they go back and go back and go back to try to figure out a way to retain it. And you can't retain it because there's no it. And kind of once you get that, then you're sort of into Krishnamurti territory. There is no path, there is no thing to find, there is no truth. There's just, you know, it's all provisional. You can't really know. You're going to die. That's a bummer. You know, and let's get on with being kind.